Welcome to Story Comic Presents, where we interview amazing storytellers and artists. This is episode 414. I'm your host, Barney Smith of StoryComic.com, and we're excited to have with us the internationally acclaimed and celebrated children's book author and illustrator, Daniel Jude Miller.
Well, thank you. That's quite an intro. Thank you very, very much.
I mean, I would say out of all the children's book authors and artists that I have interviewed over the last 5 years, you're the one that probably has the most baseball caps.
And I probably beat the person in second place by like 365. So I got a big lead, like a big lead. They're not catching me.
Yeah. So for our listeners, for those that are not watching the video, so for our listeners out there that might be driving in a car and whatnot, I'm talking to Daniel Jude Miller, who is a prolific children's book author and artist, and he is in his studio that actually is filled with baseball caps. It's so many. I thought it was actually like soundproofing, like foam in the background. I thought you had all this soundproofing foam because it would just, you have it in such a specific order that it's very artistic. You can tell you're an artist hung up those baseball caps.
It's a little hard to tell, like in the video, because it's dark behind me, but there is a totally specific system in how they get hung up. So they're in like, first they're in color order. So like if you were able to see the whole thing, you'll see all the red ones are with the red ones and so on and so forth. But then it breaks down even within the color. It'll break down to alphabetical depending on what letter is on the hat. And then within that, it will break down even further if it's a thing. When I'm not making books, I'm buying hats. Those are like my only two things that I kind of enjoy doing. Yeah.
And so Daniel, so you've published lots and lots of books that you've had out there. You've had Bruce the Spruce, Ear, Claw, and Eddie, 13 Terrible Tales. You've done middle grade novels. You've also done Everybody Wake Up, which is also well known too, and Wishville Elementary. You still say that was coming fall 2024. What's the status of that?
It was delayed a little, but it's actually going to be here for real on March 1st. It's written, it's edited, and the artist in me is a little bit behind because this is the first time I'm taking so in the past I've done picture books that were not a lot of writing, but a lot of drawing. And I've done middle grade novels, which were a lot of writing, but no pictures. And this one is going to fall in between. This one is going to be sort of like an early reader chapter book. So a sort of a smaller and simpler one. But also it's going to include pictures. And so the writer in me finished all the writing and got that all tied together. But the artist in me, he's fallen behind a little bit because it turns out there's going to be a lot of drawings in it, because what's special about Wishville Elementary is that it's a choose your own adventure book. So
that's fun.
So what's fun about it is that, and it's different than other children choose your own adventure books, because those were my favorite growing up. But one of the issues I always found was when you're choosing where to go, sometimes you run into dead ends, right? It would tell you, do you open the door? And then you go, yes. And then it goes, you died. And then go back to the previous chapter. And I never liked that you could end up with a dead end. So my book, Wishville Elementary, the choices that you make, all they do is branch you off into a different path, but there are no dead ends. And if 8 kids read the book, they could end up with 8 different endings. And so everybody wins. Like nobody ends up having to backtrack or retrace their steps. So it should be a lot of fun.
And so let's back up for a quick second. And so just for our listeners and viewers to check out your work, it's at DJM, as in Daniel Jude Miller. So DJMbooks.com. You can see everything that Daniel has put out here as an author and illustrator, and also his own and also publishing. But first of all, I guess, what inspired you to start writing and illustrating children's books?
Okay, so they're two very different things, writing
Mm,
and illustrating. I was the kid in elementary school that always wanted to be an illustrator. There was never a fallback plan. There was never a plan B. I went to special high school. I went to art school. I knew exactly what I wanted to be when I was like 10 years old. And then I got a job. I got a job in editorial illustration, and it's not as glamorous as it might sound. It was really, really boring, like really boring. So I thought that I was going to get this awesome job drawing like aliens and spaceships and rocket cars, which is what I would have preferred. But I found myself in advertising illustration. And in really boring advertising illustration. I did literally wasn't allowed to use color. We were doing black and white cartoons. I literally did 15,000 separate cartoons for this company, and it paid the bills, it got me a house, but it was so not fulfilling. And after 12 years of doing all of these little boring drawings, I got let go. And so suddenly I found myself living in upstate New York in the woods with an art degree, and not a lot of choices. Thankfully, I had been writing for no real reason. I just would write and put it in the drawer. And I had finished complete books, but I never thought I would do anything with them. I had a job, like, so I didn't think that I needed them. And then suddenly I had no job. And so I needed them. And so that's where the writing started. So I always tell people, like, writing is like my second career, because the two careers started literally like 25 years in between the two.
mm. And so kind of walk us through your creative process for developing a new book.
What's really funny is, like, my primary focus in making books is kids, which obviously that should be the answer, right? If I make kids books, but more specifically, like, a huge part of my business is visiting schools and teaching kids how to write and how to draw. Now, here's the funny part. It's not only to their benefit. Okay. Obviously, hopefully by the time I'm done, they've learned about writing and drawing and they want to make their own books. But I can tell you that 50% of the ideas I get for new books are from spending time with kids. Like, it's amazing. Like, funny things that they'll say, questions that they'll ask me. So it used to be pretty easy for me to get ideas from books. I would just kind of see something out in the world and go, that would make a good book. It got really easy once I started going to schools. I can't tell you. I literally could probably write 2 books per visit I go to a building, because there's just kids, they just come up with the wildest things, and it's all brilliant. It's all genius.
As you say, because you are the artist and you're also the author, how do you balance your multiple roles in the book creation process?
That's one of the hardest parts. Because yeah, I have a lot to do. Like, not, and it's not even just the artist and the author. Like, I'm also doing the graphic design. I'm also handling the website. So
Mm,
usually I'll do things in sort of small parts, right? And so, for example, like, if I start writing a book, I'll write a handful of chapters or write a certain amount of it. And then eventually, like everybody, you get stuck, right? You'll get to a point, you hit the wall, it's not clicking anymore. The benefit I have is that I have other jobs. So usually I'll take what I'm writing and I'll put it aside, and I'll go and start doing drawings for a separate book, not even the book I'm actually writing. And then I'll draw for like a month, and then guess what? I'll hit the wall again, but only this time with drawing. And so now you can go back to writing the first book because you've had some time off. And usually at that point, you're past that sort of slump. And then you go back to the drawing and sort of gradually, like, all these different books, because I'm usually working on, like, believe it or not, like 3 or 4 books at the same time. So
oh
some of them
wow.
I'm working on the writing, some of them I'm finishing up the drawing, some of them I'm doing the pre-production drawings for, like the character designs, but they're not going to be finished for 2 or 3 years. But we're starting to, or I say we, only because I feel like I'm 5 different people because I have so many things to do. But so usually it's about sort of just doing everything a little bit at a time. Generally, I kind of won't do everything in one day. Like, if I have a day that I'm writing, then I'm just writing. And if there's a day I'm drawing, I'm kind of just drawing. And I usually go in sort of batches where I'll write for like a week, and then I'll draw for a week, and then I'll go back to writing, and so on and so forth until it's done.
because you mentioned the school visits piece. So that's actually a really important part of the success that you've been able to create, for your business. Um, how do you tailor your school visits to engage with different age groups?
The truth is, if it wasn't for the school visits, we wouldn't be talking right now because I would have been out of this business 9 years ago. Like the school visits, not only is it what I love, but it's what sustained this business and is giving me the opportunity to keep creating books. What's interesting, that's also why unlike a lot of authors, I've written different things, right? Normally, if
Mm.
people write up middle grade novels, they tend to only do that. The reason I write picture books and chapter books and middle grade novels is because I have to go almost every day and talk to a wide range of kids. And so I needed to have actual books that I could show them and also that they could read. So it was a blessing because it kind of forced me like to try to new things. Like when I started, I never thought I could write like a novel. Like
Mm.
that was never the plan. I was happy that I could write a 15 page, picture book. And then I realized I would go to a lot of schools and I would talk to fourth and fifth and sixth graders about books. The problem was they enjoyed listening to me talk about making books, but the actual books themselves were really not appropriate for them because, it was meant for a younger audience. And so I realized I got to write something bigger, like something that has some real meat on it. And you don't know you can do it until you try. And that's the one you're showing now, the final five. That was the first attempt that I made at like writing something longer form. And hey, thankfully it really worked. It turns out it's funny. My first picture book, because takes time to learn, it took me like 10 years from the concept until the book was officially released.
Okay.
That book only has 17 pages. The first middle grade novel I did, it has 400 pages and it took 3 months because
Wow.
at that point, like had learned how to write much better. And I was going to schools. I was able to use the kids as a focus group. So I would bring them chapters and they would tell me characters they liked or characters they didn't like. So if it wasn't for the school visits, number one, my business would have collapsed a long time ago. But if also creatively, it's just been an amazing resource.
And so you kind of mentioned that too. So what challenges do you face when marketing your books independently then?
Yeah. Okay. So like that's like the $1 million question, and the answer is not $1 million, unfortunately. Okay. Yeah. When you're marketing and you're an independent publisher, it's all on you, right? And so you have to figure out any way you can tell people about your books. Now, I've kind of seen from myself and also people that I know, there's kind of two paths that I've kind of figured out. The first one is the sort of the Amazon lane, right? And there's a lot of people who take that lane and they do their advertising and on Amazon, and that's their thing. It just never appealed to me. Like that lane, it just yeah, I know some people who have made very successful businesses like that, but it was just not for me. I accidentally discovered the school visit thing when I first started. I would rather go in front of a room full of kids, make jokes, talk to them about writing and drawing, and then, sell them a bunch of books, right? Because I got to meet them, right? I got to
Right.
talk to them. It's the same marketing challenges as, I spend probably half my day. I wish I could spend my entire day making books, but that is not even close to realistic. I spend easily more probably than half my day marketing between emails and contracts and phone calls. Right before we met here today, I had two separate half an hour phone calls just pitching to schools that I'm supposed to visit in the spring. It's a lot of work, but I feel like ultimately it's the school lane is more rewarding because I actually get to
Mm.
meet my audience all the time, and that's really special.
Well, hey there. If you're enjoying our podcast, don't forget to subscribe on YouTube or leave us a 5-star review on your favorite podcast platform. Your support means the world to us and helps us keep this show going. We love hearing from you, so any feedback is welcome. And thank you for being a part of our podcast family and for all your support. It truly means a lot to us. Do you have a book that you were just particularly excited about that you said, I can't wait to people check this book out? Like, is there one book that you're just like really excited about?
Okay, so at schools, we'll usually open it up to Q&A. And then there are like the top 3 questions that you will get asked every single time at a school. The number one is, how old are you? Okay, kids, I don't know why you talk about books and drawing, and they always just want to know how old you are. Like, that's important to them. Okay. The second most asked question is what you just asked, is like, do you have, a favorite book, something that gets you excited? And I always tell them that I don't have a favorite title, because if I didn't like the title, it wouldn't exist, right? I would still be working on it. But if I had to pick, okay, if they forced me and told me, no, that's not a good answer, you have to pick, I would have to go with The Halloween Boy and the Christmas Kid. And the reason is because The Halloween Boy and the Christmas Kid is a story about my real son. What's special about him is, he loves Halloween more than anyone in the world. The truth is, on my website, if you can look around, there's a video that shows that his room stays decorated for Halloween all year round. Okay, there's literally spiders on the ceiling and ghosts on the wall. I mean, it is Halloween there 365. That's not the only thing that makes him special. His best friend was born on the same day and in the same hospital. I believe that day in the hospital, there were only 3 babies born, and the 2 of them ended up as best friends in the same grade. But strangely enough, his best friend is obsessed with Christmas. So much so that there were times that he used to keep a Christmas tree in his room all year round. So we grew up around, like, my son grew up with him, and they've been best friends. Now they're in high school, but they've been best friends for a really long time, and they're completely opposite boys. But they share that same birthday, and they share the loves of different holidays. And so if I had to pick a book that, like, it'd be pretty strange if I didn't pick the one about my own son.
Can you share a memorable reaction from a child or an educator to your work?
Okay, so I'll share the one that, like, meant the most to me. The truth is, I've had hundreds, like literally hundreds of interactions, and I appreciate every single one of them. But this is the story that I gotta hope I don't tear up, because it happens. Okay, so I went to a school, and I did a big presentation to the whole. I believe it was around the 4th grade, I believe, and we did the whole presentation. Everything was great, and they all left. Okay, I high-fived everybody as they were leaving, and they were gone. And I had about 15 minutes in the gym before the next presentation was supposed to come in. So I was all by myself. And all of a sudden, this line of kids starts coming. Okay, it was like one class, maybe about 12 to 15 kids. They had seen the first presentation. They had gone back to the classroom, and they sort of wrote like thank you notes to me. And so one by one, each one of them came over to me, and they were handing me the note. And I would say, oh, thanks for coming. And I'd say, oh, I had a great time. And they would leave. Finally, the last student comes to me. And this student, he was literally like shaking, right? He was literally like so nervous. And he looked like at any moment he was going to like literally break out crying. And I kind of made me worried, because I didn't know if, how he was handling this. So I said, hey, what's up? And he was like, I'm just nervous. And I said, oh, it's nothing to be nervous about. And he said, no, I'm nervous because I've waited my whole life to meet you.
Oh, wow.
I've never seen that before, like that serious of a reaction to getting a chance to meet an author. Luckily, I'm pretty good and pretty quick on my feet. So I put out my hand and I said to him, do you know that I've waited my entire life to meet you too? And we kind of shook hands, and he gave me his little note. And I believe his name was Tyler. And I actually put the note, it's in a frame somewhere in my office on the other side. So a moment like that, where you realize the impact like that you have, like, I'll talk to thousands of kids per week. And I try to remember that each and every one of them, right? A lot of them, they're there to laugh and they're there to have fun, but in the audience, there's someone, or hopefully there's a lot of them, that are really absorbing this and will remember this for the rest of their life. And that's what I'm there to do. And it means as much to me as hopefully it does to them.
Wow, that's powerful.
Yeah. It was serious.
Yeah. What advice would you give to an aspiring children's book author or an illustrator?
I would give the same advice that I give kids, okay? Because my job is to make more authors. My job is to inspire more authors and more illustrators. And what I would tell adults about making books is make the books you want to make, because I think too often I see aspiring authors that they look around and they see sort of what's popular, and then they try to make that book, or they try to see what genre is kind of selling right now, and they make that book. And the reality is that's not the best way to go about being creative, and it might not even work. So my advice always is just whatever book you want to make, right? Don't be afraid. And people tell me all the time, I have this idea for a book, but I don't think anybody's going to care. Don't worry about that. Like, just make the book that you want to make and do it the best job that you can. And I think I believe if people make things that they're passionate about, even if it doesn't seem like it might fit into the sort of market, if they made it super sincerely, it'll find its space. I mean, I really, really do believe that. I think you're way better off making a book you believe in without thinking about who's going to buy it. I think too often authors worry about the customer, and that's not art, right? Art is not supposed to be made for who's going to purchase it. You make the art you want to make, and then most times if you do it well and you take it serious, the market will find you. And I think I know it's hard to hear that sometimes. People want to, but I think it's really it's freeing to just make the book you want to make. It's really simple.
Is there how do you handle any like creative blocks or challenges during your book development process?
Well, like I said, the best way is usually I have like 4 or 5 books at the same time. And the truth
Yeah.
is, I have some books, honestly, that I don't want to say I've been writing them for 10 years, but some books I've written, they're finished written, but the drawings aren't done. And some of them, the drawings, like, they might be long, so I know that there's going to be a lot of drawings, and they've just been sitting there, waiting for the right moment. And most likely I'll get to them, but it could be 15 years in between when I got the idea and when I did the drawings. So the best advice is, like, look, it happens. That's the first thing. Is, I think that people think if you've done, I've done, I think, 10 books at this point. People think it never happens. It happens all the time. Every single book I've ever done, I've wanted to quit on. That's just normal. That's the creative process. But the key is to officially not quit. And the best advice I have is to put it aside, work on something else in the meantime, and then come back to it. Because when you circle back, usually you have like some fresh ideas, you have a new vision. And if it's not there, it's not there. Then do something else and circle back in 5 years. I mean, kids ask me all the time, have I ever quit on a book? And I tell them, no. I have some books I haven't finished for 12 years, but officially I haven't quit on them because I still think I'll figure it out, or like find how to, sort of complete it. I have ideas that it's not so much that I can't figure out how to visualize it, right? I have the idea, I have the story, but I don't want to just do simple drawings. Like, maybe I'm not finding the character, and so I just wait. I figure I have plenty of time, work on something else in the meantime, and come back.
How do you incorporate some of the feedback from readers into your writing process?
Oh, there's a lot. I'll give you a funny story. Okay, so the book Bruce the Spruce officially isn't out. It's on my website, but that's one of those that's in the process, in this overarching process. Okay, so it's a book about a Christmas tree, and it grows at the same pace as a little girl because it was planted on the day she was born. And when the little girl becomes a woman, she gets married in underneath the tree's branches. That's just part of the story. When I go to schools, I use that book because I have the sketches for it, but they're not colored. And I use that book just to show what a book looks like in progress when it's kind of messy. In the drawing on the day that they got married, I have the husband and wife kissing. Now, that seems like a totally normal thing to me because that's how a wedding ends, right? My wife is a wedding photographer. Every wedding ends with the kiss. As soon as I put that on the screen, I get the groans and the moans and the yucks and the grosses, and kids hate that drawing. Now, you would think that every time I hear it, that I would remember that and take it out of the presentation, fix the drawing so that they don't do it. But I always forget. And so then I go to the next school and I go, oh, here we go again. Because I know the slide's coming up. I do it and they respond that way. So I learned, like, that's a simple example of when I take a lot of projects that I'm working on with me to schools and I let them see what it is in progress. There is numerous amounts of times that they've said, I don't like that drawing. That's weird. I don't like that character. There's times where they haven't liked characters' names. So going to a school is a great thing for all of us because the kids get to learn from me, but I get to kind of introduce things to them and they're like a focus group for me. They tell me if they don't like the ending, if they, they think I should go in a different direction. And that allows me to fix it before I finished the whole project.
Right. Now, have you worked on a book as you had the outline all set up and everything and you knew, but then as you were actually writing it out, did the characters take over and then change the direction of the book that originally was your plan?
You know what's funny? I have a very strange writing process because I believe it has to do with being an illustrator first. That I've been an illustrator for so long that I sort of can envision, right, as an illustrator, you have to be able to see what you're going to draw before you actually draw it. So when I sit down to write, it's almost as if I feel like I'm in the room because I can see it. If you asked me to draw it, that would be easy for me to just show you where the furniture was and where the people were standing. I have this weird way of writing where I feel like I kind of go into that room and just sort of listen. Okay. And so when dialogue happens, it sounds strange, but it's not like I'm actually writing it. It's like I just kind of positioned myself in the room and I just listened to their conversation. Now, I have an example of the opposite of that, of a character being the way he wanted to be, and I had to nudge him in a direction. And the example is that in the final 5, it's a story about a teenage boy that loves his cell phone. And he takes it everywhere. And one day he goes and he finds this virtual reality machine that you actually get in and they project around you, anything you'd want to see. There's one rule: no cell phones allowed. But he doesn't listen. And he sneaks his phone in. And right when the machine's powering up, he sends a text. It causes the machine to malfunction. And instead of him seeing himself at the bottom of the ocean, per se, the machine blasts him back in time to the year 1955. Okay, so I had written this whole time traveling story and I sent it out to sort of my beta readers, adults actually, that would take a look at it, tell me what they liked or what they didn't like. It came back multiple times that they didn't like the main character. Now that's a tough thing. That's not an easy thing to change because if they said, oh, because he's in the whole book. And so if they didn't like the villain, maybe you can adjust it. But they went, I don't know, he's an unlikable character. Now, they cited a few examples of times he was showing himself to be unlikable. The truth is that's kind of the way he just existed. And he just kind of came out that way. So now I had to go back and kind of undo his sort of natural existence, which kind of might be as an unlikable person. And I had to kind of change the writing. And that was maybe the most writing thing or writerly thing that I've ever had to do, is kind of, instead of just listening to the character, I had to kind of write some lines for him because the way he naturally behaved was sometimes not as pleasant as I wanted it to be.
If people want to learn more about you and your work, they can go to djmbooks.com.
Absolutely.
Okay. And then from there, if we have teachers who are listening, and if they're and looking at your author visits, if we have, librarians or teachers that are in California or overseas, they could set up a virtual visit with their school that you do.
Absolutely.
That too?
Yeah, absolutely. Okay. I mean, I travel pretty far. I'm not overseas. That's a little far, but for in-person visits, I'm all over the Northeast. I travel quite a bit. But for anyone who's further than that, yeah, absolutely. I do virtual visits, and virtual visits include about 90% of what I do as an in-person visit also. So the kids don't miss out on almost anything. And they're also a lot of fun.
Well, Daniel, thank you so much for coming on. And listen, you're going to have to come back on once you actually have like Bruce the Spruce and then your, was it Wishville Elementary?
Absolutely. I would love to. Yeah. Yep. Bruce and Wishville.
That's right. Perfect. Excellent. Well, thank you so much, Daniel.
Well, thank you. It's been a pleasure. A lot of
So
hats.
it's are those like any team or just
Yes.
MLB teams?
All MLB teams, but every team. And kids always ask me, do you have a Phillies hat? Yes, I have like 11 Phillies hats and 14 Mariner hats and 11 Astros hats because every few years they change. And so then that means I
Right.
have to rebuy everything. And the fun fact is that only one of them has ever been worn. All the rest are brand new. The only one that's ever been worn was the first one I got when I was in the fourth grade. That one's dirty. The rest of them are totally clean.
And do you have then like even like the feeder teams and stuff like that? You have their
No,
hat?
no, no. I considered that for a moment, but if you do that, the number would explode exponentially because it's hard enough having this many, but you would literally need thousands of hats. And so I don't have enough wall space in this house to have that collection. My wife tolerates this, so we're not going to push her luck.